Well, Republican Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore is refusing to quit the race. Despite mounting pressure from GOP leaders, Moore is facing growing allegations of sexual misconduct, but he continues to deny them. He says he's being harassed by the media. Well, this week, both Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Paul Ryan called for him to step aside, though it remains unclear exactly what they'll do if he doesn't. Eugene has more.
GOP Senate candidate Roy Moore told supporters in Alabama Tuesday night that he's the victim of a political ploy.
I'm now facing allegations, and that's all the press want to talk about.
At least 5 women are accusing Moore of inappropriate contact with them when he was in his 30s, and they were teenagers. Claims Moore says are all lies.
I'm being harassed.
Speaking at the God Save America Revival Conference, a defiant Moore vowed to stay in the Senate race to the end.
I want to take the truth about God to our Capitol, and that's what I will do, if it's God's will.
Republicans say if Moore does not bow out of the race and goes on to win, it's unlikely he will hold the office for long. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell hasn't ruled out a write-in campaign, or if Moore wins, expulsion from the Senate.
He's obviously not fit to be in the United States Senate, and we've looked at all the options to try to prevent that from happening.
On Tuesday, the Republican National Committee cut fundraising ties to Moore's campaign. And last night, Fox News host Sean Hannity delivered an ultimatum to Moore, calling on him to clarify conflicting statements he made on Hannity's show.
For me, the judge has 24 hours. You must immediately and fully come up with a satisfactory explanation for your inconsistencies. If you can't do this, then Judge Moore needs to get out of this race.
So far, President Trump has remained silent on the issue. Weijia Jiang, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Eugene Scott's a political reporter for the Washington Post. He joins me now. So, Eugene, where do you see this going? I mean, you see these Republicans who say we want him out. If Moore wins, what are their options?
I think their options are expulsion, one of them. They won't seat him. And I think also they're trying to figure out a way to get someone else on presented to voters before the election, or to see if they can even get the election delayed so that they don't have to face these options in the Senate.
Because it's too late to get them on the ballot, right?
You cannot.
So what do you think it would work by saying, hey, this is the guy we back now instead?
Well, it depends on when they start and who that write-in candidate is. And we saw earlier today, Mitch McConnell appeared to float the idea that the person who has the name recognition that could make something like that happen in Alabama right now is Jeff Sessions. And so that would require the White House to approve of Jeff Sessions no longer being Attorney General, getting someone else in that position, and sending Jeff Sessions back to the Senate. The question is, does Jeff Sessions want this to happen himself? And the White House, Trump specifically, hasn't said much about that.
They haven't said much about it. The president's been abroad on a 12-day trip. Is there a sense of gauging where the White House stands on the Moore issue?
Well, I think the White House is being incredibly careful because many people are bringing up the fact that the White House right now is occupied by someone who also is facing sexual harassment allegations. And so there's a sensitivity and a level of sophistication that this has to be handled with. And I think they're really trying to figure out the best way to do that.
So you see these folks in the RNC who've distanced themselves on the federal level, but you see these state Alabama officials who continue to side by them. I mean, you've covered local politics for many years before your job at the Washington Post. Why do you see this divide between the federal and the state officials?
I think tribalism is what's shaping everything right now more than anything else. And that's why we are seeing some GOP chairmen say Mitch McConnell is not one of us. He is a creation of Washington. And I think there are people who are in these red states who feel underheard and underrepresented in the same way that they communicated during the 2016 election. And they believe Roy Moore would be the best candidate to be their voice in the Senate, regardless of what happens. We're also seeing people who seem to believe that anything from the right is better than a Democrat. And unfortunately, for many voters, this may include someone facing these types of allegations.
So you still think he has a good chance?
I think he still has a good chance. We haven't seen a Democrat take this type of office in Alabama in decades.
I want to ask you about tax reform.
Sure.
House working up a bill today. They hope to vote on it tomorrow. What's the sense on this? Is this going to pass?
Well, it's not really clear, and it was looking more favorable before there was a desire to introduce the mandate conversation regarding Obamacare. If this passes, the first year that this tax plan could be in place would mean about 4 million Americans would not have health care coverage. And we saw how many Republicans and Democrats view the possibility of not having health care coverage unfavorably. That's a problem that the Republicans faced previously.
I mean, when you look at the details being revealed about the Senate plan, it shows that these tax cuts would require, they want to get this repeal of the mandate, which means no matter who you are, you've got to buy into the system and get some sort of health insurance. How do you think that's going to actually complicate the process?
Well, because we're actually talking about two different things, and part of the desire to have something, when I say two different things, I mean health care and tax cuts. Yeah. And part of the desire to have the plan repealed is that it would provide funding for more tax cuts. And so it's not really clear to many Republicans who are in favor of tax cuts how this will affect their residents, because our tax plans based on states are so different in and of themselves. That's why we saw so many Republicans in the House not support the bill who are from New York and more expensive places where the cuts to mortgages could not just be as beneficial for voters.
When you look at the tax plan, what do you think the biggest hurdles are in sort of reconciling what the House does and the Senate does?
I think the biggest hurdle is mainly the diversity of America in terms of what the cost of living is. I mean, the way taxes affect someone in Alabama, where Roy Moore lives, are quite different from the way some taxes could affect someone in Long Island. And so getting the Senate Republicans on the same page about mortgage deductions, child care, and health care are just 3 points that affect more than anything else cost of living.
You know, there's a sense that some of these tax cuts for individuals will eventually, you won't get them after a while, but versus the corporate rates, the corporate tax cuts will remain in effect. Mm-hmm. How do you think that's going to go down?
Well, it just reinforces the polling that we saw earlier today from Quinnipiac, that people believe that this is going to benefit corporations and businesses far more than individuals. And I think that's something that Donald Trump and the Republicans have to work hard to communicate to voters that it's not the case.
So quickly, before we go, I want to ask you the Me Too bill. What is that, and is there getting traction on that?
Yes, a lot of traction. I mean, we've seen these conversations happening in Hollywood and in media about the prevalence of sexual harassment and sexual assault. And one thing that a lot of voters haven't talked about as much as they would have liked is how prevalent it is on Capitol Hill. And so we saw lawmakers, including Jackie Speer, today suggest that they want to put policies in place that make staffers working on Capitol Hill more supported and have a better route and system in place in case they've been harassed themselves.
All right, Eugene Scott, great to have you here on set.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.